welcome to This Week. On today's episode, we will be interviewing DNC Chair Daytona Nerd. We will be tackling issues surrounding the primaries, shedding new light on why he dropped out and endorsed William. Then, our discussion will move to the general election and the plan for the Democrats going forward. Stay tuned. Mr. Chair, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Sam. How are you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good myself.
Alright, now let's move forward. The election is obviously the main topic at hand right now. First, I'd like to ask, why did you drop out of the presidential race, and why did you endorse William, who is very conservative for a Democrat?
Well, there are a couple things about that. First, let's go with the reason why I dropped out. Well, I think it was coming out of the debate, I was in second place, and I was probably going to get second in Iowa too. Well, it was close between us and Iowa, you and I. It was like within a point, I think. So that was competitive. So I did the math basically, and I figured that with the way the system worked before the whole rules change thing, there was no chance I could win because I had focused on Iowa too much in an attempt to make William kind of Cameron try to get him back into Iowa when he really didn't need to. I was trying to trick him into doing that. He didn't go along with that. So strategically, I was down the boat with no paddle. I had two options. I could either stay in and I'd probably go for like a solid second place, or I could drop out and save myself the stress. So I decided to do that. And now, of course, the more controversial part of that was me endorsing William. I think I made it clear, though, in the message I sent that endorsed William. Let me see if I can find it. But I made it clear there that I wasn't necessarily endorsing William on a policy basis. What I was endorsing William for, though, was because, as it stood, he basically had no chance with the strategy he was going for. He was going for a very southern-based strategy, and the way the system worked at the time, he had no chance. Like, all the momentum would be against him, and like he wouldn't even be able to place in a state like Texas, for example. He wouldn't be able to place there, so he couldn't really get any delegates. Kind of made his whole point pointless. So, I'm probably one of the more lefter members of the party, and William and I disagree heavily on social policy, probably on economic policy or whatever he's running on in this sim. But I decided to endorse him basically to give him kind of the chance to present his view for the party. It's not a view that I agree with necessarily, but I think it's a view that needs to be said. I think it's a view that needs to be discussed a bit. And I don't feel like that would have happened had I stayed in. It would have been just a battle between me and Cameron. So, yeah, as chairman of the party, I felt like it was my responsibility to kind of keep the doors open for the party and kind of have those opinions expressed and debated and sorts, and I felt like this was the best way to do it.
So you just wanted that viewpoint to be represented, is what you're saying?
Yeah, right. And there's also a good meme.
Yeah, that's true. There is that effect, but you didn't think that his views would be destructive to the party in any way?
Destructive, I'm not really sure if they would be destructive. Destructive would imply that I really think that he could necessarily sway people over to his line of view. And personally, I don't think that would be the case. I think it's just a view that needs to be discussed for the sake of having to discuss views. But necessarily destructive? That's tough to say. I think his economic policy is not really destructive. I think it's mainly the social policy where it lies. And I think on that, like, in our current field of candidates, I felt as though that wouldn't necessarily become a problem where the rest of the candidates tried to kind of one up each other, try to one up William for shock value or anything. I don't feel like that was the field of candidates we had. I feel like that they would kind of attempt to rebut the points and we could have a good dialogue. Um, it wouldn't play out like the 2016 Republican primaries in a couple of ways where, a few of the candidates like Trump and Cruz tried to outdo each other. I didn't think it was going to turn like that. And thankfully, it looks like I'm right. We're going to have a debate. Looks like probably the end of the week, if I had to guess. I know Bigfoot's trying to get his own debate going. We're trying to get our debate going. We'll see what that turns out, but I think that'll really be the place where we see that happening.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Like, I don't think William will necessarily like change our candidates, but I think William might, in a way, scare away more moderate voters, or like our more liberal side. They might see an authoritarian fitting in with the Democrats, or maybe not fitting in, but at least thinking
Like
that
having a
that is his
platform on
party.
which to stand
Yeah,
is what you're saying.
I think that might turn away like more socially liberal people, but it's
Well, I mean,
his defeat
no, it's not
too.
really like the alternative provides anything better for any socially liberal. I think it's still pretty abundantly clear that the Democratic Party is the only place for social liberals. I mean, you just look at that Republican debate.
Yeah,
There's not really any room there for a social liberal there. So really, the
yeah,
only option would be to stay independent or join the Democrats. And the way the sim works, you really have to join a party.
yeah.
So.
Yeah, and of course the Republicans too have Jude Shire, who, in a way, like, is similar to William in a lot of ways. So
Yeah, him
I
and
get
William.
both
Him
sides
and
have that
William
authoritarianism
definitely. I
represented.
think. I think. If I can continue on the topic of Jute a little bit
Yeah,
and William, I think that they kind of go along that same track. I think they definitely both take in their own ways inspiration for Donald Trump. It's the populist kind of message
yeah,
with a socially conservative bent. I think what they're going for is trying to go for a nostalgia of times long past. They're both
yeah,
trying to go into the essence of the 50s. You look at Jute's opening statement from the Republican debate, and that's pretty clear what he was going for there. I think he was definitely a little bit intentionally. He only used male pronouns there, like a future for all males, men, he, him. I'm not going to kind of drive that home point any further, but I think it was just kind of the way he phrased it. I think he was going for a more waxing nostalgic feel of the 1950s, and that's kind of the ideal for a lot of social conservatism. But
yeah.
I think,
Yeah,
I think,
Eisenhower is.
yeah, the Eisenhower days. Um, William kind of goes for the same thing, the Dixiecrat kind
Yeah,
of
Wallace
ideology.
and the like.
Yeah, Wallace definitely. He's going after that. It was also pretty prevalent, like the 30s to 50s kind of democratic social ideology in the South. He's trying to reclaim that lost time. So,
Yeah, I don't really see populism as the way forward for this country. So of course, I know it's always going to be there. It's just troubling to see it gaining so much ground, especially in my own party.
well, I think there always has to be some element of populism. The thing is, you can't really.
Definitely.
It's kind of. I feel I don't want to make myself a meme and sound too much like the Aristotle golden mean kind of guy, but just like a lot of things in their extremes are just too far. Populism in its extreme is not good, but
Yeah.
the populism is built on a kind of good assumption that it should be up to the people to decide their own destiny. So naturally, the leader should follow what the people want. But you do have that element where you have to follow what you know to be best that doesn't really fit with kind of the easiest impulse that people have, because populism relies so much on the easy impulses, what comes first to
Yeah.
mind, first thought without any thought. Um, so that's really kind of where the problem of it lays. I have no problem with trying to assert with the will of the people. You just kind of have to make sure that the view is thought out.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to listening to the voters. I think that's something you have to do in any
No,
democracy. But once it gets to the point where you're trying to just give the simplest answer to the voters and you're trying to influence
yeah,
them and
water
just
down your
just
message. Yeah.
giving them what they want regardless of whether it's good for the country,
Definitely,
worrying.
definitely.
All right, well, enough about the primaries. What I would really like to talk about is what you're doing as the DNC chair. How do you see the party going forward? I mean, the Democrats, they don't have the House or Senate, and the presidency is up in the air with the incumbent Obama outgoing.
Right.
Where do you think the Democrats, under your leadership, can and will win?
Well, we have to be a little realistic first. I don't think there's a very good shot we'll take back the House with the whole mechanics of it going. If the sim was larger, I think it'd be possible to kind of wage that battle. But as it stands, there are just too many battlegrounds that the Republicans won that we just can't really put up candidates for. Uh, because they're not interested in the seats or they're more interested in the Senate, you know.
Yeah,
So at best, we'll probably do a few seats better than how the Democrats did in 2016 in terms of House. That's best case scenario. But I'm not going to try and sell the illusion that we're going to win the House. I don't think that that's going to happen.
I agree.
Um, Now, the Senate and the presidency is pretty interesting. You know, the Senate, there's been a healthy lot of interest in battleground seats, which is pretty pleasing to me because, you know, it's always a risk that you had to gamble in the sim because, you know, with the House and easy Senate seats, you're guaranteed. You guaranteed to kind of have a place in the sim. Whereas if you go for the battleground seats, you know, that's the risks that come with it. You get the chance to win the House, but if you lose, that means you are out of playing the game, really, unless you want to go into media. So I was very encouraged that we had a lot of people going up in the Senate, and I think that that's where we'll get a lot of it back. I think we had some very competent people running for seats that were pretty close in 2016 that the Democrats didn't take, and I think we have a good shot at winning them
Hmm.
with good campaigning strategies. And the presidency, of course, you know, that's kind of the more reachable target, a little more reachable than the Senate, in my
Yeah.
opinion, um, in some ways. And in other ways, it's not as easy. I'm not exactly 100% certain on Justin's simulation strategies, how it's different necessarily from the primary as opposed to the election, how he plans to pose like swings and stuff in safe Republican states and such. Um, but I think it's probably the more achievable strategy. We'll probably have to learn from where Clinton lost in 2016 and try to actually have like a firm foothold in the Rust Belt. I think that that will get us to victory. Uh, as long as we have that fight and don't neglect it, I think we have a good shot of taking that. So I think my ideal for what the party will take is taking the presidency and, you know, taking the Senate. I probably would be around maybe anywhere from 51 to 54 in the Democratic Party would probably be a good amount that I would hope for. 54 senators, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with a lot of your sentiment there. I don't really think the House is as competitive as would be ideal. I think really the best we can hope for is a split Congress where with us closely winning the Senate race. I
Agreed.
yeah, the battleground states are really where we're gonna have to duke it out. I think it is going to be very close. I think it already is close now. There's only a few states that we have to pick up to gain a majority, but we are going to have to
And
fight for those few states.
yeah, I mean, the you saw the release candidates list. You know, the Republicans aren't gonna give up on it. They got some good people running for the seats that are up in the battlegrounds like Florida and such. It'll be me versus Jew, maybe. I forget if
Yeah,
he has a primary going on in the Republican Party for that seat. Um,
I think
I think
he
Missouri
does.
has a battle. New Hampshire has a battle. You know, these were all close states,
Mhm.
and I think yeah, it'll be a tough battle, but I have faith in the people that we have running.
Yeah, I think each party is really going to want to try to fight for the closest states, and I think that's where the election's going to really turn interesting. Like I personally am running in Missouri against Bigfoot, and we're both very prominent members of the Sim. I think both very active in the
Yeah,
media. We both ran a primary campaign. I'm still running. I believe Bigfoot dropped out, so I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that turns out. We're really gonna have to get our
Yeah, I'm not.
debates in and whatnot.
I mean, it
Campaign
could
hard.
help in debates in terms of getting your poll numbers up. That's where prominence could really help. But I think playing the numbers will ultimately be kind of the strategy that would probably lead battleground states to victory. It's kind of a numbers game, as I think you and I have both learned in this primary. This is kind of more mechanical kind of simulation. So you saw Cameron manipulated it greatly. He manipulated the situation to where he could get the momentum to really kind of get a foothold in the Democratic primary. I'm not sure how much strategy Dobbs put into his strategy in terms of picking up the Republican primary, but he's doing very, very well. So, and Jute messed up a little bit. You saw the recent meta
Yeah.
decision in terms of his strategy, but he played it pretty smart too in terms of the numbers game. He definitely played a very conscious strategy. So I think that will be where a lot of the big battles will be held. It'll be a game of, kind of algebra and calculus.
I think with the Senate though, it's going to be less numbers and strategy oriented than the presidential race, because with the presidential race you're focusing on states.
Right.
Like you have states that you need to win, and in that with the primaries you have to go by which ones are getting voted on first and try to get momentum from that. But with the Senate race, it's just one body. There aren't like specific areas that you need to target, and both of
I thought
you,
Justin had a district system going on for
I
a Senate. But I
I
was
think
confused
he
on how he worded
may.
it in the documentation.
I think that may just be like for houses for house seats. I'm
Mm,
not sure how that works, but really, like still though with the Senate, it's one body.
it's true.
It's it's just a straight first past the post race. It's not like you have an electoral college with swing states and what you need to win. Both you and your opponent have 2 campaign stops per day, I believe. And I
Hmm.
think both of like in the Senate race, both of them are just gonna get in their campaign stops, and then I think debates are really gonna be the deciding factor. And the campaign stops I think are also going to make a difference if you're not running against another player. And I don't want to get too far into the meta, but
Yeah.
yeah, I
I
think
mean,
the campaign stops are tools for like for players to change outcomes where you're not running against another player. But when it is two people, 2 players competing, I think it's really going to come down a lot to the debates and how those are going to be handled. And we haven't seen yet how a debate against opposing parties goes. So it's going to be kind of up in the air, I think, with that. There's still a lot
yeah.
to
I
see.
mean, I have my yeah. I'm still not certain how Dustin will do it. I feel like we're gonna see a lot of how that works. It seems like the member base is a little more Republican, and perhaps this is kind of the opposite concern of that other sim. But
Yeah.
since polling plays such a big part in the primary, most likely in the general election, having a bigger Republican voting body that could impair us in the
Well,
Democrat.
I
But
believe that the way general election debates are decided is the media group that sponsors the debate has a panel of, I believe, evenly Democratic and Republican people to decide who's going to win the debate. And I think that's going to be interesting because I think we're going to see a lot of partisanship. I think there are going to be a lot of people who just
yeah,
won't
I'm just
take the other side. So unless you have someone from like a certain person's party who just doesn't like that other person a lot, then maybe we'll see Victor. But I I'm not sure how a draw would work out in the debates. I think it'll be really
and these
interesting.
are
You're cutting out a bit. Not.
uh, oh, am I?
Yeah, you're still cutting out. Hold on, let me restart the call. Well, sorry about this, everyone. We seem to have got a poor connection. Hello?
Hello?
I can hear you now, Mr. Chair.
All right. Um, yeah, as I was saying, this is the first I've really heard about the whole kind of panel system being used, and I think it's necessarily inherent in the system, evenly split Democrats and Republicans, and just kind of the factional nature that you have. I think that unless, like you said, it was like a truly exceptional candidate in either party that someone from the opposition party really liked, which is the less likely scenario. From the same party that you just have a personal grudge, um, then I think that'd be the only way to split this.
Yeah, I also think it does give a lot of potential for corruption in the media. Like, I think a lot of um, media corporations are going to try to get to sponsor debate where they really care about who wins. Then they're going to try to carefully pick the panel to like get people to vote for who they want to win. And I feel like the moderators of the sim are going to have to crack down on that a bit if it does occur. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I would be a bit surprised if it didn't work out like a jury selection system where both sides had to agree with who's on that panel. And that could probably root out the cases where it's not a draw. And that would basically guarantee it being a draw. And that could be a mess, definitely.
Yeah, and another thing, in Missouri, things are really interesting because I have ABC and Bigfoot has a lot of other news corporations. So I think,
Oh yeah.
I feel like it shouldn't be allowed that like any of our news corporations sponsor the debate. I don't know if that's in the rules, but I think that should be something that we're concerned with.
Yeah, I don't think that is necessarily written in the rules per se that a person's news outlet would be against it, but I feel like in practical implementation it probably wouldn't happen. But I mean, there's a lot of the scenarios we won't know how they play out until they actually happen. You can read what's in the documentation, but it's very hard to envision how it turns out. I can speak to that. I know you didn't want to get into meta too much, but I'll make this kind of brief. Just reading the documentation for the primary, nobody could have expected kind of the scenarios that actually played out. Now they look kind of obvious in hindsight, but it's only really once we see it that we really know what exactly the rules imply.
Okay, I did just look up the rules just for some clarification. One member of the mod team selected by the Players Association will join the panel, which will also have an even number of Democrats and Republicans. It says if no true independents can be found, so I suppose if there are independents, then you can go that route of only picking them, but I think at the moment we don't have that many. So, yeah, it seems like
All
the
picked by the
the
Players
PA, yeah, the
Association,
PA is
which is
gonna.
which, as
Hey,
I've called it before, I've called it the Democratic National Committee. So
yeah, that will be interesting to see how that
that could
plays
be
out
very.
as
That could be.
as the
I
yeah.
think the concerns are pretty obvious here. I'm sorry, Sam, that you weren't invited to that party, but you're kind of
Yeah,
late.
I I didn't realize that the PA was having a vice presidential election. But yeah, that is interesting. I do think the mod team has a bit of a lefty bias, so we'll see how that plays out. But again, it's the beginning of the sim. I know I didn't want to touch the meta too much on this show, but I do have to say that this sim is just starting out. And there's a lot of kinks we have to work out. So
I felt like it was kind of inevitable that we'd get down to meta just by the positions you and I hold and the nature of
yeah,
this and just being kind of whole experimental. Like, I feel it was inevitable we were gonna talk about experimentation and stuff. So
yeah. All right. Well, I we're hitting over 20 minutes now. I think it might be time for us to sign off here. So thank you for joining us today on This Week, Mr. Chair.
thank you for
Daytona
having
Nerd.
me, Sam. It was a real pleasure.
All right. Hope to have you again sometime.
I hope so too. Thank you.
All right. Well, signing off.